Leo Haviland has written a book about the wordplay used by people who comment on the economy. Now, we're in the middle of something quite new, this populist upsurge during the current U.S. election underway. Do you see this populism affecting the lexicon of words used by commentators and the people in general?
It certainly has become entwined with commentary and vocabulary present in American and other discourse. Let's look, Scott, at many of the dualities. We have populism on one side and the establishment and elites, or the man, on the other side. We have left and right, Democrats, Republicans, nationalists, internationalists, and globalization fans. However, mixed in all of this, we have values and visions that are different. All the persons who are making these labels popular attribute implicitly or explicitly values of goodness and badness. So there's the good left or the bad lefts, the good left wing, the bad right wing, or vice versa. They'll also attribute language of rationality, reasonableness, logic, intelligence, and common sense. So the populists may say that the establishment doesn't represent anything which is common sense or reasonable or fair or good. And the globalization people may say that of the traditionalist. So the intensity of these characterizations, however, also should be underlined nowadays, Scott, because the intensity shows how significant the unhappiness is, which on economics and political and social terms have caused populists, who've always existed, to have such a substantial role on the media stage.
Yeah, the intensity is way, way up. And even in some of the most respected media, for example, you look at the New York Times and you get an extreme leftist intensity. You look at the Financial Times and they're also using intensely anti-Trump verbiage that you wouldn't have expected from the Financial Times in years past.
Right. Those establishment presses reflect the effort of the central banks and their allies and those who do not want significant populist change to allay the concerns of the populist community so that they will not rise up or rise against and try to affect such changes. Perhaps you recall, Scott, the movie Network of roughly 40 years ago, where a newscaster, actually, and you're an experienced newscaster and experienced journalist, where a newscaster spoke up and said, we all know things are bad. They're not bad, they're even crazy, but what we all need to do is get mad and stand up and scream, I'm mad as hell, and we're not going to take this anymore. And that's a situation which is, as a feeling, widespread nowadays in the United States, Europe, Latin America, and elsewhere around the world.
Leo, this populist upsurge that we're seeing in North America and Western Europe in particular, it presents itself as having to do with culture. Right? We have foreign groups coming in who react within the community differently than the native-born population. And this is what seems to have the people really excited and is leading to this nationalism and xenophobia to some extent. But then one also wonders to what extent the populist response is economic in nature. Have you parsed these two causes of the populism at all? And can you share some insight on that?
In the United States context, one can focus on significant changes that the populist revolution or efforts at revolution seek to effect. The first dimension is in a realm of shared values, which one could label, without getting into specifics, the American dream, what we see is shared values not being achieved in practice, particularly on the economic dimension. So there's increasing economic inequality. The middle class feels squeezed. Many ethnic groups feel they're not getting their fair share of the pie. Many from all backgrounds, particularly the young, feel they're not getting adequate opportunity or a chance for social mobility. So that's one key dimension. The other is on the cultural diversity dimension. And here one has to be careful. America has always been rather open to persons of diverse background, whether religious, ethnic, and national. However, what has changed, in my view, in recent years is the extent to which the cultural diversity has shifted not simply from background, but into an increasing faith by those who often are tied into the globalization talk and the progressive language and the liberals, such that all values are created equal and all discourse and viewpoints are created equal within the American dream. And in practice, that has meant some suppression or attack on what maybe 20 years ago, and certainly more, would be viewed as traditional American values. So on the populist front, taking those two seismic shifts, the greater economic inequality in particular, and the greater attraction of a globalized issue and globalized diversity, and extending it to the American dream, you have an effort at change which generally has been associated with Trump and to some extent the right or Republicans, of going back to a less globalized economy and somehow a more traditional nationalism. But on the left, and Sanders, for the use of those labels, they want a more open and globalized national sense of values where diversity reigns, but still want economic opportunity and fairness. And those different visions are being reflected in great hostility, heated language, and a lack of ability to compromise, which we've seen in the conventions and the discourse of the major parties and their advocates.